All right, today we're diving deep into inflammation. And I know what you might be thinking. Swelling, right? But it's so much more than that. It's your body's elite, highly trained first responder team. It's a protective response that is absolutely essential for us to survive. And to really get it, we need to zoom all the way in, down to the microscopic level. I mean, think about it. A paper cut seems so simple, right? A tiny little slice, a bit of redness, a little sting. But what's actually happening right under the surface of your skin is a microscopic drama of epic proportions. That tiny little breach kicks off a full-scale biological battle. So, to really understand this battle, we're going to follow the action step by step. First, we'll look at the body's fortress walls. Then, we'll hear the alarm when they're breached. We'll watch as the emergency systems kick into gear, see how the battlefield gets prepped, meet the cellular army that comes marching in. And finally, we'll look at the aftermath. Is it a clean victory or a long, drawn-out war? Okay, let's start at the very beginning with our first line of defense. The best way to think about your body is as a fortress, one that's constantly under siege from all the pathogens in the environment. So job number one is pretty simple. Keep the invaders out. The walls of this fortress are our physical barriers. Your skin is the obvious one, of course, but also the linings of your respiratory and digestive tracts. They're all made of these super tightly packed cells. And they've got mechanical defenses too. You know when you cough or sneeze? That's not just some annoying reflex. That's your fortress literally launching intruders out before they can even get a foothold. Pretty smart, right? And our fortress isn't empty. Just look at this. It is bustling with trillions of friendly citizens. This is our normal microbiome. And these microorganisms are critical allies. They're not just hanging out, they actively fight for us by competing with dangerous pathogens for food and space, and they even release their own antibacterial chemicals to help defend the walls. But what happens when those defenses get breached? When that paper cut actually breaks the skin? Well, the fortress walls have been broken, and an alarm has to sound, and it has to be immediate. So meet the mast cell. This is one of the most important sentinels in our entire body. They're stationed strategically everywhere, kind of like guards right next to the highways of our blood vessels. And the moment they detect an injury, they essentially explode in a very controlled way. It's a process called degranulation. They're unleashing these pre-stored biochemicals, like pulling the pins on hundreds of tiny chemical grenades that kickstart the entire inflammatory response. Now, the most famous chemical in those grenades is histamine. Its mission is immediate, and frankly, it's brilliant. First, it causes vasodilation, which just means widening the local blood vessels. Think of it like turning a 2-lane road into a 4-lane highway, so you can rush more resources to the scene. Second, it increases vascular permeability, which makes the walls of that highway leaky. Now, why would you want that? Well, because the reinforcements, the good guys, have to be able to get out of the blood vessels to get to the battle. Histamine is the chemical signal that basically yells, "Open the gates!" That first alarm from the mast cell is fast, but it can't do the job alone. It needs major backup. So the body activates this powerful, interconnected emergency broadcast system, a flood of plasma proteins that are always just circulating in your blood, waiting for the signal to go. 3 major systems get triggered all at once: the complement, clotting, and Kinnin systems. Now, the most important thing to get here is that these are all cascades. It's like dominoes falling. You activate one single protein, and it triggers a chain reaction that leads to this massive, incredibly rapid amplification of the whole response. It's an unbelievably efficient way to go from a tiny signal to a huge reaction in seconds. So this table breaks down what they do. First, you've got the complement system. Think of this as a targeting system. It paints invaders so they're way easier for our immune cells to see and destroy. Sometimes it can even build a device that punches holes directly into bacteria. Then there's the clotting system, which builds a physical barrier. It forms this fibrin mesh to stop you from bleeding, but it also traps microbes in a net, keeping them from spreading. And finally, the Kinnin system. This is the ultimate amplifier. It produces bradykinin, which doubles down on making vessels leaky, but here's the crucial part. It's one of the main reasons you feel pain. That pain is a vital signal that tells you something is wrong. Okay, so now all these alarms, the histamine, the proteins from the cascades, are having a really dramatic effect on the local environment. They are prepping the battlefield by completely changing the local highways, your blood vessels. And this is the moment where all that microscopic chaos becomes something we can actually see and feel. These are the 5 cardinal signs of inflammation, and I promise you, you've experienced all of them. You've got redness, heat, swelling, pain, and of course, the loss of function that comes with it. These are not random symptoms. They are the direct physical evidence of the battle that is raging right under your skin. So let's just connect the dots. It is pure cause and effect. Remember the vasodilation, the widening of blood vessels? That rushes more warm blood to the area, causing redness and heat. And what about the increased permeability, the leaky vessels? Well, that allows fluid to escape into the tissue around it, and that causes swelling. And finally, those chemicals like bradykinin that are released, they directly trigger your nerve endings, and that causes pain. You see? Every single sign tells a part of the story. All right, the battlefield is officially prepped. The roads are open. They're leaky. Now it is time to bring in the troops. The cellular phase of inflammation is all about getting the right cells from the blood to the site of the injury. And they get there through this absolutely remarkable process called diapedesis. This image shows it perfectly. The leukocytes, our white blood cells, literally squeeze themselves through the gaps in the walls of the blood vessels. They leave the highway and enter the tissue, all guided by following a trail of chemical signals. Now, the arrival of these troops follows a very specific timeline. The first ones on the scene, showing up within 6 to 12 hours, are the neutrophils. Think of them as the shock troops. They're numerous, they're aggressive, but they're also short-lived. A few days later, the macrophages arrive in force. These are the heavy-duty cleanup crew, but they're also the commanders who are going to orchestrate the entire next phase, healing. So what do these troops actually do when they get there? Well, their primary weapon is phagocytosis, which literally just means cell eating. It's like a hunt. First, they have to recognize and stick to the target. Then they engulf it, pulling it inside the cell into a little bubble. That bubble then fuses with a pocket that's full of powerful destructive enzymes. And then finally, destruction. The invader is completely dismantled. And right here, you can see that whole process in action. Look at that. The phagocyte is wrapping around the bacterium, engulfing it into a bubble we call a phagosome. That bubble then merges with a lysosome, which is basically the cell's stomach, to become a phagolysosome. And inside that toxic chamber, the invader is just completely annihilated. This is the cleanup crew hard at work. So after the battle, what happens next? Well, there are 2 potential outcomes. Either the threat is totally eliminated and the body successfully cleans up and starts to heal, or the battle turns into this prolonged, grinding war. And this comparison is absolutely critical, really high-yield stuff. On one side, you have acute inflammation. This is the good fight. It's short, lasts maybe a week or so, it's led by those neutrophil shock troops, and its goal is crystal clear: eliminate the threat and then heal. But on the other side, you have chronic inflammation. And this is when the war just never ends. It can last for years, and it's led by a totally different set of cells. And because the battle is constant, the very weapons of inflammation start destroying healthy tissue, which leads to permanent damage and scarring. And this is a hallmark of that chronic war, a granuloma. This is what happens when the body's defenses just cannot eliminate an invader, like the bacteria that causes tuberculosis. It's a last-ditch effort. The macrophages band together to literally build a wall around the enemy, trying to contain a threat that they know they cannot defeat. So we really end with this question. We've seen that inflammation is this elegant, powerful, and absolutely vital protective system. But when that system fails to shut down, when the acute battle becomes a chronic war, our greatest protector can become the very thing that slowly destroys us. And that's the double-edged sword at the very heart of so many chronic diseases.